Muy buenos días a todos. En nombre de AmCham Honduras, es un gusto darles la más cordial bienvenida a nuestra conferencia del día de hoy, Estrategias y Mejores Prácticas para la Implementación del Nearshoring en Honduras y la región. Antes de dar inicio con el programa del día de hoy, daré algunas instrucciones. A todos los participantes les comentamos que el programa se estará llevando a cabo completamente en inglés con traducción simultánea al español. Desde ya, pueden dar clic al icono de interpretación o traducción ubicado en la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom si están desde sus computadoras o en la parte superior si están desde sus móviles. Se van a desplegar dos opciones, audio original, español, en algunos casos inglés, sin embargo el inglés estará deshabilitado ya que tendremos el audio original. Si desea escuchar el evento en el idioma inglés, puede mantenerse en audio original o si desea escuchar la conferencia en el idioma español, deberá seleccionar dicha opción. Recuerde que en cualquier momento puede cambiar el idioma según sea su preferencia. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of AmCham Honduras, it's a pleasure to give you the warmest welcome to our virtual discussion panel, Strategies and Best Practices for the Implementation of Nearshoring in Honduras and the region. Before starting today's program, let me give some instructions. To all participants, the program will be held completely in English with simultaneous translation to Spanish. Since from now, you can click on the interpretation or translation icon located at the bottom of the Zoom screen if you are on your computer or at the top if you are on your mobiles. Two options will be displayed, original audio and Spanish, and in some cases, English. If you want to listen to the event in English, you can leave the original audio, or if you want to listen to the conference in Spanish, you must select the Spanish option. Remember, you can change the language according to your preference at any time. We take this opportunity to thank our special allies, the Association of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America and the Caribbean, ACLA, the Embassy of the United States in Honduras, the World Bank, Crowley, and Think Huge, with whom we formed a strategic alliance to carry out this event. We also want to thank our sponsors, Club Platinum, Argos, Chevron, Consortium Legal, Crowley, Dagas, Deloitte, Dinant, Diunsa, Dole, Ficosa, GK, Ismania, Pangea, Securities, and Seguros Atlántida, who made it possible for us to hold today's event. We also thank to all the participants for your presence in this important conference. As AmCham, we hope that this event will be of great benefit to all of you and that we'll be able to evaluate your objectives. To all the participants, you can send to us some questions for our conferences and panelists through the Q&A section enabled at the bottom of the Zoom screen if you are on your computers or at the top if you are on your mobiles. At the end of this conference, we'll be having a space for Q&A in which your doubts made during the conference will be cleared out. Please note that at the end of the day, we'll be sharing the YouTube link with the recordings of today's event. Without further ado, let's kick off with today's program. And for this, let me introduce to you Ms. Claudia Catan Jordan, actual president of AmCham Honduras and currently vice president for Central America, Mexico, and Panama for Crowley, who will be giving us some welcome remarks. So Ms. Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniela. Good morning, all. On behalf of the Board of Directors of AmCham Honduras, I'm pleased to welcome you to our virtual Nearshoring conference. First and foremost, I want to thank the valuable participation of our special speakers, Greg Hogger, Executive Director of Think Huge, Joe Lopez Gallego, Corporate Strategy Director for Crowley Maritime, Keynote Scott, World Bank Resident Representative of Honduras, and Dr. Richard Feinberg, Professor of Emeritus from the University of California, San Diego, previously served on the National Security Council and in the U.S. Department of the State's Treasury Authority on Nearshoring and Nearshoring Strategy. They will provide us with valuable insights about nearshoring. Our special thanks also to Neil Harrington, Senior Vice President of the United States Chamber of Commerce and the Association of the American Chamber of Commerce in Latin America and the Caribbean, ACLA. Additionally, We thank each of you for participating in this important event. We hope that this conference adds value to the development of the growth of your company. But before we begin, I'd like to share with you a short video of an overview about nearshoring.
Please accept our apologies. We're currently with a technical problem, but will be solved in 10 seconds.
Daniela, if we want, we can leave the video for later. Let's give it a trial. Okay. The video is coming, but no sounds. I believe what we are missing is the sound.
I'm sorry, we're currently presenting some technical issues. We've tried this, so please accept our apologies. Ms. Claudia, if you can continue, and we're going to solve the problem shortly.
Okay, so what you're going to see later on the video is that nearshoring is really the strategy which a company seeks to move part of its productions to be closer to its destination. After the disruption caused by the pandemic, companies are looking for shorter and more resilient supply chain that can always stay operational. Nearshoring is the new business strategy that promises to support countries and companies from the effects of the inflation, COVID-19, and the trade effect brought by the war between Russia and Ukraine, and better prepare for future challenges. Among the main advantages of nearshoring are cost reduction, access to talent and technology improvement in the quality of products and service, and reduction of operational risk. We, as a company leader and business people, must consider that nearshoring also has a strategy plan which consists of the following: strategic positioning, specialization of human talent, regulatory improvement, production plan, and sustainable industrial infrastructure. All of this is what made nearshoring a great opportunity not only for Honduras, but for the whole region. Honduras, in particular, has become an attractive nearshoring destination in Central America and has been positioned within the 10 countries most attractive in Latin by Forbes magazine, Central America. Combining the strategy advantage such as geographic location, infrastructure, skilled labor force, cultural affinity, government support, in nearshoring Honduras is an attractive option for companies looking proximity, cost saving, and operational efficiency. Using Honduras advantage, companies can unleash their full potential, optimize their outsourcing strategy, and achieve sustainable growth on today's competitive global market. If your company are still not practicing it, I invite you to do so, since there are 5 important characteristics that we as a company must evaluate to select regionalization destination. And let me repeat some of them: cost and capital, workforce and talent, infrastructure, service and quality, and ESG, environmental, social, and government factors. With a brief introduction, I open this event and leave it in the hands of the experts in this field, who in this conference will be highlighting benefits of nearshoring in the region from their perspective, and the strategy and best practice for nearshoring implementation in Honduras and the region. Once again, thank you for joining our event. I hope this conference is useful for you and your business objectives. Thank you very much and welcome everybody.
Many thanks, Ms. Claudia. And continuing with our program, let me give a warm welcome to Mr. Neil Harrington, who is the Senior Vice President of the Association of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America and the Caribbean, ACLA, and for the Americas of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Harrington, the floor is yours.
Daniela, thank you so much. My querida amiga Claudia también. Great to see you, Lisanka, the great team and the Comité Ejecutivo at AmCham Honduras. Thank you for this really kind invitation. I will say that I neglected to get the memo that this event was in English, so I have some notes that I made to myself in Spanish. So if you see me pausing, it's just because I'm going back to translate in my head what I've written down. But I'm excited to be here. I salute all of you and your great sponsors who appeared on the slide and that I've seen over the past couple of days for bringing this forum together, because it's just such a critical issue right now to highlight the potential challenges and opportunities around nearshoring and what we can do collectively as the private sector and working with our government colleagues across the region to advance it. It's the reason why I think a lot of you know, some of you were with us last week in the Dominican Republic, where we debuted a survey that we've been conducting for the past few months. A survey we committed to around the framework of the Summit of the Americas last year, working with the State Department and beyond, to study supply chains, really with the end goal to develop a better understanding of strategies of how companies are managing supply chains, the corporate perspectives on what we can do to enhance supply chains in order to obviously enhance at the same time foreign direct investment across the Americas. This just briefly, because I think a lot of the things that Claudia mentioned were certainly, all of those factors that Claudia mentioned were factors that we surveyed executives about across the hemisphere and beyond. We looked at executives singularly responsible for decision-making when it comes to supply chains in companies across multiple sectors, including pharmaceutical, medical devices, electronic equipment, IT, automotive, and much more. Again, I think similar to some of the factors that Claudia mentioned, we took on 4 sort of principal themes. One was strategies that companies are taking to mitigate risk in supply chains. Another was factors that influence decision-making in terms of areas of supply and direct investment. A third was perceptions around obstacles, barriers to realize enhanced FDI or enhanced supply through our region, through Latin America and the Caribbean, and future plans that these companies have in terms of whether or not they're targeting the Americas for enhanced investment. We'll be sharing those, like the broad findings, within the next few weeks. Again, some of you got a preview last week, but I think one of the things, again, in the interest of time, because we have the experts coming, what I'll say, one of the most interesting findings for us was of the 5 principal factors considered most important in the companies we surveyed. And those, just really quickly, those include logistics, and logistics is, cost and time, delivery time to market, security, macroeconomic and political stability, the rule of law, and labor costs. 4 of those factors were identified by the survey respondents as the biggest obstacles to investment right now in the Americas. And those really do drill down on logistics, security, macroeconomic stability, and political stability, and the rule of law, those 4. So, I mean, that all to say that, yes, there are obstacles, but that's what these events are for. Events like today's are for. As you all know well, we talk about it a lot. It's us, it's the private sector, not governments, that construct supply chains. And therefore, it's key that all of the companies around this table today and otherwise that operate supply chains, that depend on them, that they and we be the ones to identify both the opportunities and the challenges that the private sector is confronting. Because with those findings, I think we are collectively starting to take these findings to governments in Honduras and beyond, much beyond in the region, to be able to start to prescribe the policy that we need to be able to solve some of these challenges. So again, I congratulate all of you for coming together today. Honduras has so much potential, we think, to benefit from nearshoring as to its neighbors in Central America. And so I think it is opportunities like this and events like this that where we really get down to llegando al grano, you really get to the fruit of what we need to accomplish and move this forward. So I wish you all a very productive and fruitful event, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some of the takeaways. Thank you so much, Daniela, and back to you.
Thanks, Neil, for your warm words. And well, now it's time to open the first block of today's event, which is the benefits of nearshoring in the region. And before we start, I would like to talk a little about our 3 conferences for this block, which is for Mr. Gregory Huger, Ms. Keenan Scott, and Mr. Joe Lopez Gallego. Mr. Gregory Huger is the Executive Director of Huge Business and Investment Council. He brings to his work in extensive global management and senior leadership skills gained through more than 40 years of challenging government and private sector engagement spanning different world cultures, regions, and socioeconomic conditions. He has held senior executive positions across the public and private sector from the U.S. Agency for International Development and the Peace Corps to Unicol Corporation, Deere & Company, and Bechtel International, with posting across 5 continents. Huger leverages expertise gained through these experiences to tackle problems in both the public and private spheres, including significant experience in leveraging private capital to finance and achieve international development objectives. We will also count with the participation of Ms. Keenan Scott, who joined the World Bank in the Poverty and Human Resources Division. Since then, she has held economist and senior economist positions in the Development Economics Vice Presidency, DEC, where she managed the Living Standards Measurement Study and in the Latin America and Caribbean unit of the Poverty and Equity Global Practice. Before moving to Honduras, Ms. Keenan was acting program leader for Central America. She has worked in all the regions of the world during her career, including Bosnia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Honduras, among others. And last but not least, we have the participation of Mr. Joe Lopez Gallego. He's first head strategy development for Crowley Logistics, a business unit that provides full cycle solutions, including ocean and land transportation, warehousing and distribution, customs clearance, and other value-added services for a broad array of customers and their unique needs worldwide. In his role, he focuses on growth through core business advancement and transformational opportunities. He bears responsibility for planning and executing to drive value creating, leveraging, improved management processes, and data-driven insights. He's a proven executive with more than 13 years of international work experience. He has worked at Boston Consulting Group, High Quality Nutrition Company, and his own consulting practice. He also served 9 years at the U.S. Army and as an officer of Black Hawk helicopter pilot. So to start, Mr. Huger, I would like to start with you. So from your perspective of the Think Huge initiative, what benefits have you identified with the nearshoring?
Well, thank you very much, Daniela, Claudia, Neil, and all the sponsors for giving me, representing Think Huge, the opportunity to participate in this important event. Thanks for organizing it. The issue of immigration, and as we learned during COVID-19, the challenges of supply chains that source from Asia for the US market create a great opportunity for nearshoring and friendshoring, bringing production and value chains to our region closer to the US market. Think Huge's priority is massive job creation in the Northern Triangle in the USA through investment in nearshoring and the regional strategic infrastructure to facilitate it. Think Huge is driven by its founders, who pursue our investment and job creation mission through clusters of companies. An example of this is our textile cluster, which is creating a vertically integrated textile industry in the Northern Triangle by investing in 4 new yarn spinning mills in the region that will replace yarn previously sourced from Asia. Parkdale Mills, Intradeco, San Juan Textiles, Fruit of the Loom, and Caracol Knits have been able to pursue such projects due to the yarn forward provision of the CAFTA-DR treaty with the United States. These investments will create highly paid technical jobs and insulate the region from the volatility of a textile industry based only on sewing jobs that can migrate quickly as global economic conditions evolve. Huge founders with NCTO and the Asociación Hondureña de Maquiladores are playing an active role in creation of the Northern Triangle Textile Industry Workforce Development Initiative, which links Unitec University of Honduras with North Carolina State University, the best textile program in the US, to train 10,000 Hondurans to fill the mid to high level technical jobs being created in the textile industry over the next 5 years. We plan to expand this effort to El Salvador with Comtex and to Guatemala with Vestex, and to apply it to other priority sectors as nearshoring progresses in the region. The textile cluster emphasized the need for speed-to-market logistics and competitive infrastructure to make the Northern Triangle an ideal platform for nearshoring. This led to the creation of the Think Huge Logistics Cluster, led by Huge founder Claudia Catan Jordan of Crowley Maritime, who's with us today, or we're with her. With the Houston Airport Systems Development Corporation, Avianca, Sanmar, and UPS. We also created an infrastructure cluster led by IDC of Guatemala and including Grupo Larach, Cementos Progreso, and Aceros de Guatemala. These efforts are focusing on expeditious customs and border processing and competitive regional infrastructure to link the Northern Triangle internally and with export markets to support nearshoring. We're collaborating with CIECA, the development finance institutions and business associations and foundations in the region to support implementation of the CIECA Master Plan for Trade Facilitation and Infrastructure, which is scheduled for approval by the Central American presidents next week, June 27th. We're organizing investor conferences, bringing together project owners in the Northern Triangle seeking funding with financial institutions in search of good projects to finance. In April, for example, we held a meeting of 12 financial institutions, including Huge founders Ficosa, Banco Industrial, and Banco Cuscatlan, with the principals of 8 bold new private infrastructure projects, with a total investment of $3.4 billion to generate 140,000 jobs in the region. The projects included 3 state-of-the-art industrial parks in Guatemala and El Salvador, 2 large energy projects in Honduras, a large data center in El Salvador, and a pioneering private sector highway construction project in Guatemala, and the expansion of Aeroman in El Salvador to absorb jet aircraft maintenance, repair, and overhaul moving from Asia to become the largest provider of MRO services in the Western Hemisphere and one of the largest in the world. Think Huge is organizing road shows to bring to the Northern Triangle or commercially strategic locations in the US companies interested in moving part of their value chains to our region. We're working on this with the textile and garment industry, pharma and medical devices, electric mobility, and the toy industry. For example, 80% of the toys manufactured in the world are manufactured in Asia by a handful of large companies. They're looking for alternatives. They were focused on Mexico, and we are opening their eyes to the opportunities in the Northern Triangle. They're interested in manufacturing capacity, ease of doing business, logistics, labor standards, personal and judicial security, rule of law, and a dependable business environment. Together with Georgetown University, we will offer a virtual executive training program on nearshoring and sustainable investment. The program will address the practical, legal, and economic aspects of a nearshoring strategy in the Americas and discuss the challenges and opportunities to accelerate it in the Northern Triangle. The success of nearshoring depends on the efforts and collaboration of everyone. Governments at all levels, the private sector and civil society in Honduras, the USA, Guatemala, and El Salvador. That's Think Huge's mission and what companies value the most. At the national level, it's important to ensure legal stability and legal and physical security. The role of governments in this context is to create and sustain a legal, regulatory, and administrative framework favorable to nearshoring. Interaction between government and the private sector that identifies and addresses problems and opportunities is a mutual responsibility. Infrastructure investment is also an opportunity for governments to collaborate with the private sector by identifying priorities and incentivizing private investment to mobilize the necessary resources without relying on the limited national budgets. The role of the private sector is to invest, compete, pay their taxes, to create well-paid jobs with good social benefits, to maintain global labor standards, and to ensure the well-being of their employees and their communities. The role of the U.S. government in this context is to support private investment in nearshoring and the related infrastructure, to facilitate it through initiatives such as competitive transportation infrastructure, the transmission of natural gas from the United States to Central America, and the provision of 5G telecommunications to the Northern Triangle at a cost competitive with China. It's important to maintain CAFTA's yarn forward position and fund the training of the workforce in the Northern Triangle to fill the jobs created by nearshoring. Nearshoring is a historic opportunity for the Western Hemisphere to attract new investment for massive job creation and the chance for the people of the region to live the American dream at home without having to seek it somewhere else. The question is, who will take full advantage of it? Will it be countries like Colombia, Dominican Republic, and Mexico? Or how about Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador? The opportunity is big enough for many to benefit. Who can capitalize on it early on and place itself in a strong position for the future is the crucial issue. Huge is encouraging companies like the ones I mentioned in the toy industry to source from the Northern Triangle. They will certainly diversify their supply chains. They tell us that their decisions about where to move will be based on personal and juridical security, rule of law, competitively priced clean energy, a qualified workforce, and a supportive business environment. It's important for governments and the private sector of the Northern Triangle to work together to grasp this opportunity. Huge is committed to doing our part to make this a winning team. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Huger, for your comments. And continuing with our program, now we will have, I would like to call Ms. Keenan Scott from World Bank's perspective. Ms. Scott, what benefits has the bank identified with the nearshoring?
Right now. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting the World Bank to participate in this important event. I'm accompanied also by our lead economist for Central America, Pedro Rodriguez, who will answer any of the difficult questions that come up. I wanted to start by seeing if I can make the technology work and share my screen. So if you could confirm that you can see it, I would appreciate that.
Yes, all perfect, Keenan.
Excellent. So what I wanted to do is start a little bit and talk about sort of the global context, some of the trends that we're seeing in foreign direct investment and FDI, and also opportunities and challenges and where the World Bank is able to support countries. So first, the global architecture for trade and investment is changing quite a bit, and that's due to the need to adopt new technologies, in particular the digital technologies we've all learned from COVID-19, the change in geopolitics, and in particular the trend towards enhancing supply chain reliability through nearshoring and regionalization, what we're talking about today, and the increased awareness of public and private sector actors about climate change. The global FDI is the trade barriers are increasing. We're seeing that, especially in large markets like the US and Europe, there's been an increasing set of barriers put in place. There's new notifications of WTO, regional trade agreements is also rising fast. We've seen that the changes in global FDI have more than tripled. Before the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, the levels had tripled, but then they were fairly stagnant. There was a dip in during COVID-19 that then recovered, but we're really projecting that the FDI levels are not going to recover full time or continue their increase. However, there are changes in the composition of FDI that I think are giving opportunities for Honduras and for the rest of Central America to be able to leverage and enhance FDI inflows. First, there's significant shifts in the geographic distribution of FDI, a little bit what our previous participant mentioned, that there's the shift from Asia back to LAC, perhaps. Secondly, there is a shift into service-related FDI away from the standard manufacturing FDI. So nearshoring opens up opportunities for Central America, not just to attract FDI, but to increase its participation in global value chains. But it requires, obviously, the countries to be strategic and to target and to sharpen their promotion of specific sectors. The main beneficiaries of reallocations, this is based on a study that we did asking companies, where did they expect to be moving their assets in the next 3 years? So the main beneficiaries of reallocations are expected to be East Asia and the Pacific, and Europe and Central Asia, with more than half of the firms indicating that their largest investment increases would incur in those regions. This is a survey of 1,060 firms. In the Latin America region, Mexico is the only current country where FDI reshoring is noticeable in the data. But the key sectors that are expected to change, to be reduced in China and to increase in LAC include textiles and apparel, food and beverages, transport and logistics. And Central America has comparative advantage in all of these areas. And last but not least, but another really interesting trend is a move towards green FDI and away from what they call polluting FDI. And this again is something that Honduras can take advantage of. However, to take advantage of these trends, obviously, there's an important reform agenda that needs to be diligently carried out, even in countries that have managed previously to attract large amounts of FDI in the past relative to their GDP. Countries like Costa Rica, Panama, the Dominican Republic, and even Honduras, which can be considered good cases in lack of attracting FDI. The key advantages of these markets is the degree of market openness in all of the Central American countries, with a share of trade over GDP of up to and over 100% in Honduras, Panama, and Nicaragua, 60% in Costa Rica. Second, however, the participation in global value chains is low in Central America, which is one of the lowest in LAC, and LAC is one of the lowest in the world. So there's a lot of room for a change. But the region has been able, as you can see from the graphs, has been able to attract significant amount of FDI in the last few years. And this can also, this is a trend for the future, we hope. As was mentioned by Neil, obviously there are opportunities, challenges, and some of the areas I just wanted to highlight are obviously, as both the first two presenters mentioned, political, social, and economic stability is a must, both in the terms of the past track record of the country, but equally important by putting in place or reinforcing what we call strong anchors, i.e. central bank independence, fiscal rules, etc. All of these are important anchors for economic stability. Also, this is because it's important to think that for the firm's decisions to move to do nearshoring is a decision they make once in a decade, once in every 2 decades. So it really requires a lot of confidence that this is a good investment, obviously. Another point that was raised also is infrastructure, the access, cost, reliability. For most industries, this implies a need for efficient ports, well-maintained roads, a good supply of electricity, internet communications, connectivity, and other industries require good water, sanitation. All of these are relevant for different types of FDI, but infrastructure is a core component of attraction. The other is the availability of a labor supply. And here, ideally, with some commitment from the state to help reskill the labor force towards the need of the specific industry. A little bit what was mentioned from Think Huge of trying to work with universities to improve skill levels, but at all levels. The other, access to markets, obviously Central America, and Honduras in particular, is very well positioned to the North American market, and it's got good connections with the European markets. And the trade agreements help tremendously, such as CAFTA-DR and the EU Central American Association Agreement. These are trade facilitations really are a must, and they are needed to guarantee the rapid entry and exit of intermediate and final products through various transportation modes. A few additional and more specific preconditions to improve FDI attraction include transparent and efficient dispute resolution mechanisms, a bit the rule of law, a predictable tax environment. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have large tax exemptions. It means you have to have some consistency and certainty. And then on this latter point, just on the tax point, the World Bank is carrying out an assessment of tax incentives in 4 countries in the region to assess their cost effectiveness and to foster a discussion on how to focus these incentives in a way that is going to be the most determinant for a foreign investor or a domestic investor. So I would like to close by stressing that we as the World Bank would love to be able to support any key parts of this agenda together with other development partners, public and private, including AmCham, USAID, ACLA, Think Huge, and Crowley. We've recently presented to some of you the World Bank Trade Strategy for Latin America and the Caribbean region in an event in Washington, which has opened the way to stepping up our technical assistance and lending services to the Central America region and the Dominican Republic. For instance, we're supporting, as was just mentioned by Greg, we're supporting the CIECA and the Council of Ministers of Integration of Central America in preparing a trade facilitation 2.0. And we've been supporting the deep integration efforts of Honduras and Guatemala, which has now been joined by Salvador, and we hope in the near future could be joined by Nicaragua. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Scott, for sharing valuable information such as the opportunities and challenges of the nearshoring for the World Bank. And well, now we have the participation of Mr. Joe Lopez Gallego. So Joe, from the perspective of the private sector and focus on the logistics sector, what benefits has Crowley identified with all this nearshoring going on?
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I'd like to express my gratitude to AmCham Honduras for allowing me to speak with you today. Your organization has been instrumental in promoting bilateral trade and investment between the U.S. and Honduras, fostering strong economic ties, and facilitating business partnerships. Your dedication to enhancing the commercial relationship between our 2 nations is commendable, and I applaud your valuable contributions in driving economic growth and prosperity in Honduras. I'm here today to introduce you to Crowley Maritime and to discuss the significant investment we are making to promote nearshoring in Honduras and in the region. For those of you that don't know us, let me tell you a little bit about our company. Crowley is a privately held, U.S.-owned and operated company with 5 different business units covering a variety of sectors. We not only provide integrated supply chain and logistics solutions, but we also provide government solutions, shipping services, fuel services, and wind services. Through its comprehensive suite of offerings, Crowley Maritime has built a reputation as a trusted partner for businesses seeking to establish or expand their operations in Honduras and Central America. Now, Crowley has recognized the significant investment that will come to Honduras and to the region in the next few years. As you're probably aware, nearshoring is all over the news. Research by McKinsey & Company found that up to 70% of companies are looking to nearshore in some way in the coming years. And according to a Deloitte survey of over 200 manufacturers, companies plan to ship up to 20% of their Asia originating freight to the Americas by 2025. And this is expected to increase to 43% of their Asia originating freight by 2029. This means that while we are starting to see some nearshoring investment today, experts expect this amount to more than double in the next 5 years. So what does this mean for Honduras? Well, according to the IDB, nearshoring represents the potential for more than $1 billion in added exports every year. Nearshoring can also facilitate a reduction in economic dependence on specific sectors and promote a more balanced and resilient economy via growth in new industries. Now, what is Crowley doing to support Honduras and to prepare for the expected growth in manufacturing and logistics? First, Crowley is investing in additional vessels with 4 liquid natural gas powered ships coming online in 2025 to support Honduras and the Central American region. These vessels will add an additional capacity of almost 6,000 TEUs a week and will allow companies who move their manufacturing or sourcing to the region to have a reliable partner for their logistics needs. Second, Crowley has embarked on a multi-year journey to drive digital transformation in its end-to-end supply chain management business. We've invested millions of dollars to implement state-of-the-art technologies to streamline and optimize supply chains and enhance visibility and traceability throughout the entire process. Third, Crowley is looking to make investments in warehousing, terminals, and distribution centers to support the expected growth. In addition, we are looking at advanced energy solutions to help companies meet their energy requirements in a cost-efficient and sustainable way. Last, Crowley has been at the forefront of implementing sustainable practices and initiatives in the maritime industry. Recognizing the importance of environmental stewardship, our company has made significant strides in reducing its carbon footprint, improving operational efficiency, and supporting sustainable development. Crowley's goal is to be the most sustainable and innovative logistics provider in the Americas by 2025. One of Crowley's notable sustainability initiatives is its commitment to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. The company has set ambitious targets to decrease emission intensity and improve fuel efficiency across its diverse fleet. Through the use of advanced technologies and alternative fuels, Crowley aims to minimize its environmental impact while ensuring reliable and efficient transportation services. The company has been actively exploring and adopting cleaner fuel options, such as LNG and biofuels, which emit fewer pollutants compared to traditional marine fuels. Nearshoring is also helping our customers significantly reduce their own carbon emissions. By choosing to establish operations closer to home, companies can minimize the need for long-distance transportation of goods and services. This reduction in transportation distances leads to decreased fuel consumption and subsequently lower emissions. Additionally, nearshoring allows for better supply chain management, enabling companies to streamline logistics and reduce waste. By optimizing transportation routes and minimizing inventory, nearshoring can contribute to a more sustainable and eco-friendly approach to global business operations. In conclusion, through these 4 initiatives, vessel modernization, technology, infrastructure, and sustainability, Crowley is positioning itself to support Honduras as nearshoring activities accelerate. As we look toward the future, I'm confident that Crowley will continue to play a vital role in shaping the nearshoring landscape, unlocking new opportunities for growth, and driving prosperity in Central America. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe, for sharing with us how Crowley is specifically taking advantage of all those benefits that nearshoring is bringing to your company. And once again, thanks to all our conferences who has given us, from your point of view, all the benefits that nearshoring is bringing to you. Remember that nearshoring enables businesses to move their operations to a closer and more cost-effective location. This close proximity allows for fewer time zone differences, cultural discrepancies, and a greater level of control in decision-making processes. And now it's time to invite to our special guest speaker, Dr. Richard Feinberg, who will be talking about strategies and best practices of nearshoring in Honduras and the region. Dr. Feinberg is Professor Emeritus of International Political Economy at the School of Global Policy and Strategy, GPS, at UC San Diego. His 4 decades of engagement with inter-American relations spans government services in the White House Department of State and the U.S. Treasury, several Washington, D.C.-based public policy institutes, the Peace Corps at Chile, and the numerous corporate and nonprofit consultancies. Since 2005, He has been the book reviewer for the Western Hemisphere section of Foreign Affairs magazine. His most recent publications are Widening the Aperture, Nearshoring in the Near Abroad 2021, Open for Business, Building in the New Cuban Economy at 2016, and Nicaraguan Tragedy from Consensus to Coercion 2019, among other books. So, Dr. Richard, if you please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniela. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. You've already had some very, I think, competent presentations from different points of view, but I think we are seeing similar perspectives on the opportunities for nearshoring for the region, for Honduras, and what both the private sector and the public sectors need to do to take advantage of these opportunities. There are a number of strategic drivers behind nearshoring, and I think the point to emphasize is that these drivers are not just short-term flash in the pans. These are long-term trends operating in the global economy, which should benefit the region if the region can seize the opportunity. Nearshoring, of course, as we all know, and as Claudia and our family know very well, the idea of nearshoring is hardly new. It's been going on for several decades in the region. So the question is, why has the growth been modest, and what could be done to really add much more dynamism to the nearshoring concept? So you have rising costs in Asia, particularly labor costs in East Asia, that relatively speaking make Central America potentially more competitive. Most importantly, in the last several years, you've seen what from some point of view is a rather alarming rise in tensions between the United States and China. And despite Secretary of State Blinken's recent trip, the State Department naturally tries to dampen tensions and increase dialogue. But there are many forces operating. And I can tell you I'm in Washington right now, and the temperatures are rising when it comes to antipathy towards China. So the atmosphere in US-China relations, I think we can predict, will continue, perhaps unfortunately from a strategic perspective, to deteriorate. But that does therefore cause many firms to sort of rethink their global sourcing strategies, want to not decouple, but reduce or de-risk their presence in China and look for alternative locations. And the flip side of that is what we now call friendshoring. So rather than being located in areas of significant geopolitical tension, let's move to friendlier geopolitical areas, including hopefully, but not necessarily, Central America. But these are deep trends, and therefore this is not something that has to be done overnight in Central America, and a lot of the necessary reforms to make the region more competitive cannot be accomplished overnight. But the good news is there is time. There are years in which these changes could be made. We've already referred, and I think you had very excellent initial presentations, to the obstacles that exist in Central America. We've had CAFTA-DR now for well over a decade. I participated along, I think, with many of you in the negotiation and launchings of CAFTA, and there were a lot of great hopes at that time. And there has been some progress, but I think we need to be honest with ourselves, not the progress that many of us had imagined 15 years ago. So CAFTA did very much reduce a lot of the trade barriers, but by itself, it seems, did not propel the type of growth that we need in Central America. 2%, 3%, 4% growth rates are just not enough in terms of an expanding population and the aspirations of our populations. Why hasn't CAFTA-DR by itself done enough? Well, regional integration really hasn't proceeded. You can look at the trade numbers. Intra-regional trade has simply not grown enough, which means that you have still very small markets. And of course, if you're exporting to the US, The local region doesn't matter as much, but still, there are economies to scale, and Central America remains quite a fragmented region. Then in many of our countries, and we need to be upfront about all this, we all know this, we may not want to say it publicly, but there has been significant democratic backsliding in some countries. And that cuts against what we were talking about when people say, it's an easy phrase to say, we want political and legal security, but that has huge implications for the types of politics that are present. And not all the politics in Central America these days are moving in the right direction. They're not even, in fact, they're backsliding in some places. And that is something we all have to worry about. Then with regard to the labor force, I was so happy to hear about that Georgetown program that Greg mentioned, because the labor costs are modest, but this, with regard to productivity levels, those are not what we need to move up the value chain in the global supply chains. And so we desperately need in the region more training programs and community college and technical programs that provide a labor force that meets the demands of investors and the global supply chains. And then, of course, the issues of infrastructure and energy being costly in the region. And these are not new insights. We've known this for many, many years. And so we have to ask ourselves, why haven't these issues been more directly addressed and firmly addressed and addressed at the necessary level? But those are the problems. We heard of course, as one would expect, a sort of upbeat presentation from the World Bank, but the World Bank recently published quite an alarming publication called Falling Long-Term Growth Rates. And in that publication, there's a section that deals specifically with Latin America. And the bank projected potential GDP growth of only 2 to 3% for El Salvador and 3 to 4% for Honduras and Guatemala. Now, those aren't terrible growth rates, but again, those aren't the dynamism that we really need for the peoples of Honduras to feel that the growth will be sufficiently rapid so that they can attain those middle-class living standards and really good jobs that they all aspire to. So the United States government, being quite alarmed at recent trends, we see the indicator of the problems in the region, of course, is massive immigration. And that, of course, created huge political headaches for first the Trump and then the Biden administrations. So the analysis that the administration put forward is their root causes analysis, which I think is a very frank exposition of the root causes of migration in the region, which shows serious problems in all of these areas that the various surveys show that investors are interested in. The administration assigned Vice President Kamala Harris to work on these issues. I think probably not her favorite assignment, but she has been working at it, and I give her a lot of credit for that. And her program for Central America, according to her numbers, has generated over $4 billion of investment coming into the region. Many of those firms were already engaged in the region, no doubt, but hopefully the idea is they'd be scaling up their investment. And she's worked to mobilize not only the World Bank and the IDB, but the Export-Import Bank, Development Finance Corporation, USAID, to do more in the region and to partner, of course, with the private sector. The interesting initiative of the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, which are very innovative in terms of US policy, because it calls for a much more activist role of government. It basically says the market left to itself is not doing enough to move supply chains towards friendly states. And so there's a big, long list of US government subsidies for firms that decide to either onshore or nearshore. And this has mostly been aimed at increasing high-tech investment in Mexico. Mexico stands to be the big winner, and Central America and Mexico, to some degree, are competitors in all this. And Mexico has the advantage, of course, not only of even greater proximity to the US, but a much, much bigger internal market. So scale opportunities. However, I do think the US government will shortly be announcing, my sources tell me, that Panama and Costa Rica, as well as Mexico, will be eligible for the various subsidies that the CHIPS Act and IRA promise to promote nearshoring. Unfortunately, that doesn't include the Northern Triangle, possibly in part because of you're just not in those high-tech supply chains. But I do think there are also some political factors involved. And both Panama and Costa Rica, relatively speaking, have had stable and prolonged economic growth and democratic stability. Another factor that I think we need to be aware of are various tensions in US global trade policy. I urge you all to read a speech recently given by the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, at the Brookings Institution, in which he basically said, and I was shocked, he basically said, globalization is taking us down the wrong path. And international trade, not so sure it's a good thing. Coming from the National Security Advisor, and this echoed the words that we've heard earlier from Catherine Tai, who's at USTR, does seem to call into question whether the US still supports CAFTA DR. Does the US still support free trade agreements? The US argues that we need not a consumer-centric, but a worker-centric trade policy. And what does that mean? I thought that if you benefit consumers, after all, are workers, and that if the price to consumers decline, that's another way of saying that the purchasing power of wages goes up. And if we seriously cut back on global trade and shut down Walmart, consumers as workers will find their real wages depreciated. So I don't really quite understand the messaging now coming out of the Biden administration. And I say this as someone who previously have worked in both Republican and Democratic administrations. So what we're seeing now is a global skepticism, I think, in at least big chunks of both the Republican and Democratic parties. So the issue for the region is, can the Caribbean Basin, and specifically the Northern Triangle, locate themselves as exceptions to this global skepticism that we're now seeing in Washington? Can geopolitical proximity outweigh the broader concerns about whether globalization and international trade and investment actually benefit American workers or not? In that regard, of course, a big driver, as we all know, but maybe don't necessarily want to articulate, is the issue of China. And again, I can tell you, being in Washington these days, the China threat is very pervasive now in thinking in Washington. Now, and from Honduras, of course, your president was recently in Beijing and talked about negotiating a free trade agreement with China. What could come out of that with regard to the issues we're talking about here? Well, at least if we look at the experience of Costa Rica, which for over 10 years has had a free trade agreement with China, Costa Rican exports to China have not exploded. They remain really quite modest. And Costa Rica has a more diversified and stronger economy than Honduras. So looking at Costa Rica as an indicator in any case, I don't think Honduras should expect a large boost in exports to China, even in the presence of a free trade agreement. Similarly, large-scale balance of payments inflows, not impossible, but unlikely, again, given Chinese behavior in most other places. Rather, what the Chinese might be able to provide is some investment in infrastructure, perhaps in energy projects, perhaps in digital. And, we can think about the geopolitics of that. But in terms of just the pure economics, actually, given the infrastructure needs of Honduras, that sort of investment, if done properly, if transparent, if good projects with returns on investment, if those conditions are met, then those investments from China actually could boost the types of investment and trade that we are hoping to see thrive in the region. Put a little differently, ironically, Chinese investment in Honduran infrastructure could actually help create that more favorable business environment for US investors and other Chinese and European investors exporting into third markets, including into the United States. So going forward, what needs to be done to take greater advantage of these now long-term trends towards nearshoring? And a lot of what the previous speaker said was absolutely right on, spot on. I was very glad to hear all that. Importantly, leadership commitment is necessary, both in the public and private sector. There has to be an unambiguous position that, yes, Honduras wants to participate in the global economy and in global supply chains. And again, quite honestly, not all political leaders in the region have been unambiguous about their interest. And that, of course, increases risk, the risk perception on the part of international investors. The private sector also has to show in their own investment patterns that, of course, it's logical that investors will want to diversify and diversify internationally. I would do that if I were a citizen of Central America as well. But a significant portion of the returns earned need to be reinvested in the region. International investors want to see that local investors that know the region the best, after all, that they themselves are continuing to risk their capital to promote investment and growth in their own countries. So we need to see a new regional patriotism, if you will, of local citizens investing in their own futures. Now, with regard to the sectoral opportunities, and I think those were laid out very well by both Kinnan and Greg. In the area of apparel, for example, which the region has been strong in for a long time on a volume basis, but how do we move up the global value chain in the production of textiles and apparel? Greg pointed out some investment in textiles, and that was very heartening to hear. And I hope that continues. But I've often wondered why Central America couldn't become the next Italy, producing really high quality wovens. Why not? Not going to happen overnight, but if we had really gotten going with that 15 years ago when CAFTA was being negotiated, we might be much further along now. So I think we need to see some ambition in the area of textiles and apparel. We've talked about the possibility of investment in service sectors, IT, call centers, building upon bilingual skills in Honduras and in the region. I think that's a huge opportunity as well, but it does require some additional upgrading and training. We're all tired of hearing, honestly, heavy accents in call services with dramatic time zone differences. A huge opportunity for Honduras and for Central America to present a more efficient, more effective entry into the call center space. Then agriculture. Let's not forget agriculture. Agriculture, which of course is still to a great degree the basis of the Northern Tier economies in terms of employment, and production of certain products remains a huge opportunity. You go into a supermarket here in California or the United States, and you see lots and lots of product coming in, agricultural products from Mexico these days, from Peru, from Chile. I do see a little coming in from Guatemala, but there's still huge opportunities there, both in fresh and dried agricultural products. And when you talk in terms of critical supply chains, in some people's lists of what's critical supply chains, in addition to chips and electrical vehicles, is agriculture. Ultimately, food security, people have to eat, and that's the ultimate strategic necessity. So I do think we shouldn't forget about agriculture as one of the clusters, if you will, where the region could have comparative and dynamic advantages. Also, I think the region definitely has caught the attention of the United States, and that's a very good thing. And maybe for reasons that suggested problems, but now that you have that attention, what the region has to continue to do is to push that attention to concrete actions. And that's what I think Panama and Costa Rica have succeeded in doing, in getting access to those subsidies in the CHIPS and IRA acts. But what we've talked about for a while is the link between Mexico and Central America, and whether or not you couldn't do more to unify those economies, or put differently, couldn't there be some linkages created, and one could think of different ways to do this, between USMCA and CAFTA-DR. Now, the obvious problem, I have to say this, with CAFTA-DR now is the tyrannical government in Nicaragua. And nobody in the US Congress is going to want to pass any initiative that might seem in any way to benefit the Ortega dynasty. So how does one work around this? And one way is you can think in terms of Central America, CAFTA-DR, unifying, getting similar treatment with USMCA with Mexico, but probably on a country by country or bilateral basis. So you could have perhaps all of CAFTA-DR in such an agreement, accumulation, if you will, absent at least Nicaragua, so long as the current regime remains in place. But the idea of accumulation, I think, is a way to and to have rules of origin which help to create supply chains that work in Central America and in Mexico, then exporting to the larger international markets. To me, that's a very exciting opportunity. And I do know from my own conversations, there are people well placed in the US government that understand this opportunity and agree with it. Now, pushing it through the US political system will require some energy. And I think Honduras and the Northern Triangle that have the ear of the US government would do well to pursue that opportunity. It's another way of saying, so the public sector creates an incentive structure, which then drives the private sector to invest in supply chains that stretch throughout the region, that are efficient, and that drive exports forward. So to wrap up, what I think is really needed fundamentally is a shared vision of nearshoring in the Caribbean basin, which solves the problem of global skeptics, because it's based upon a very clear geopolitical rationale, and that produces policy incentives put in place by the US government and, of course, by local governments. In order to do that, to create this shared vision of a integrated Caribbean basin economy, you need commitments by all the key stakeholders, and those commitments by both key political actors, of course, the private sector. Civil society has to also be persuaded that this is in their interests. And then with that full participation and commitment by the various stakeholders, that provides an environment of continuity and assurance. And so those folks who are looking at the risk factor will feel assured that there will be a good business climate in Honduras and in Central America for many years going forward. So thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Faber, for your presentation and for sharing with us some best practices and opportunities that nearshoring can bring to us. We know this is a trendy topic and it's becoming more and more popular every day. So we know it's in us to encourage and instruct this topic very well. But now, because of the timing, let's move forward to the questions and answers section. We have received several questions already. So to start with, we have a question for the World Bank. What has been the impact of nearshoring in Honduras and Central America?
Sorry, had to find all the buttons to press. So I think that there's a couple of points that are useful here for the nearshoring agenda, and one of them is the need to. I mean, I think all of the participants have said this, that there's a lot of commitments that need to be made, but I think we focus on topics like digitalization, the whole government to business, government to payment infrastructure. I think that's something where there's been some movement, there's been some investment. I think it's a key underpinning for the nearshoring agenda, because it will improve the trade facilitation. I think one of the things that's out there, maybe this is not quite on track with the question, but I think it's really important to raise, because Richard raised the issue of agriculture, and that is that the EU is putting in place a zero deforestation policy, and I understand that the US will be following along that. And so countries that are exporting agricultural products are going to have to be able to demonstrate that that these products are not causing deforestation. And that's what creates a whole need for traceability of agricultural products, which I think for Honduras is something that's a bit of a challenge, because I don't think it exists in most of the sectors at the moment. And it's something where I think the international community has a role in helping support the country in moving towards this and trying to figure out how the validation mechanisms will work. And I think that's another area where technology is going to help us. I just wanted to make one other comment on the moving the value chains and in trying to improve productivity. The World Bank in Honduras has several projects in the agricultural space designed specifically to improve competitivity. And it starts by supporting small farmers that have very little access to markets or very little connection to markets to improve their production so that they would have some access to sell to markets. It also has another window which supports small businesses that have, or small producers that have some access to market, but really don't have the links and need the sort of the step up, and also supports medium-sized businesses to really improve new export opportunities. So I think those kinds of investments that work as the public sector is investing to support the private sector. As these farmers move up the global value chains, they become connected to the markets and become part of the private sector infrastructure. And in this context, we're also leveraging private capital, because the private banks are investing in this because we put in a guarantee fund. So I think there's a lot of innovative ways that improving productivity and moving different sectors of the economy up the value chain can be explored. And I think that's going to be one of the elements that will help to improve the visibility of Honduras, the markets it has access to, and attract new investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And this question goes for Think Huge. What efforts is Huge carrying out to attract more investment in the Northern Triangle, and how could a company participate in Think Huge initiative to promote through foreign direct investment in the region?
Well, thank you for that question. I mentioned in my remarks that we're focusing on toys, pharma, and a few industrial sectors that offer good opportunity. So as we bring companies into the region to look at the opportunities, they want to speak with companies with which they can do contracts to produce their products. They also, probably at a little later stage, want to make their own investments. So we, working with AmCham and COEP and CACIF, ANEP, are trying to reach out to companies in the sectors on which we're concentrating to invite them to help make these, we call them road shows, but this outreach effort to companies looking in particular sectors to change their supply chains, to be able to show what we have to offer in terms of productive capacity and infrastructure and standards and financing, the whole package that we can offer them if they're thinking about going somewhere else. And so one of the things that we offer is that outreach, and we're going to be working very hard over the next period to expand that. And within it, the need and the opportunity for companies in the Northern Triangle, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, as well as American companies from the US, to participate in that so that we can put our best foot forward and get some contracts with some of these companies or get them to commit to invest. And in order to do that, we have several of our founding members that have significant industrial parks like Alcatex, or others like the Synergy project of Pantaleon in Guatemala, or the Numa Industrial Park of CBC, that offer very good opportunity for a company that wants to establish its own factories to do that in our region and not have to worry about anything other than doing their core business, because the industrial park, be it in El Salvador, Guatemala, or Honduras, I should have mentioned Aristos in El Salvador also has and is developing more of those. What we offer as a way for companies in the region to engage in attracting foreign investment is to participate on a sectoral basis in those efforts to reach out and bring in the companies and connect them with their opposite numbers in the region. Another aspect of that, Richard mentioned agribusiness, and that was discussed a bit. We haven't done very well in linking in with agribusiness companies in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, and US companies interested in the region. One of the ways that companies could work with us is to reach out and connect. We are interested in doing that, to create a cluster in agribusiness in order then to do the kinds of things that I was talking about for our textiles and garment, which in a way was the low-hanging fruit, because that's been developing robustly in the region for decades. I remember I worked in the CBI and launched a lot of stuff in the 80s that's kind of at the basis of a lot of this. But agribusiness is there to be done. It is, as Richard said, it's one of the things that really works in the region. And we just need to link up with key players in the agribusiness sector in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador to make that happen.
Thank you, Greg. Now, the next question is for Crowley. Joe, in 1 minute, what can you tell us about how Crowley is escalating its workforce in the region to support customers moving manufacturing bases?
Great, yeah. Crowley already has over 200 employees in Honduras, and we have plans to increase that number significantly as the business opportunity in Honduras grows because of nearshoring activities. In addition, one of our pillars at Crowley is customer centricity. Customer centricity can only be achieved with the work of a strong and robust team. So we're investing in the experience, engagement, and empowerment of our employees in Honduras, developing their leadership through diverse programs, promoting and positioning careers in the supply chain, and establishing robust programs for their well-being. So those are some of the things that Crowley's doing to increase employment in Honduras and ensure we're providing good paying jobs to the people in that country.
Many thanks. And Dr. Richard, we have one question for you. And also, can you talk to us about some administrative strategies that Biden administration plans to implement in reference to the Northern Triangle to reduce migration in 1 minute or less?
Yes, well, I did mention in my remarks that Vice President Harris has been working very actively. You can look it up on the website, Program for Central America, PCA. It has a whole set of initiatives, including financing from various U.S. government agencies, working closely with the private sector in the region and internationally to spur investment and job creation. USAID also has a whole panoply of programs focusing on more social issues. Then, of course, there's also a full-scale set of programs with regard to migration, which we haven't, which is tangentially related to all of this, but is a major driver actually of U.S. interest in the region to create jobs in the region so that people feel hope and opportunity in the region, so they choose not to have to relocate northwards. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Richard. And with this, we close the Q&A section regarding our time. So thanks to our first line speakers. Without a doubt, it has been an excellent conference. And we have reached to the end of the program. And for this, I would like to introduce again to Ms. Claudia Catan Jordan, President of AmCham Honduras Board of Directors, who will be giving some closure remarks. Ms. Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniela. So before I do the closing, if there is any chance and to see if technology can help to have the videos of 3 minutes, because I believe is the recap what everybody has. Let's see if technology help us now. So thank you. I want to give a special thanks to all our guest speakers. What a great conference, what a great insights, and for all the remarks and for sharing with us today. A round of applause for all of you. As you heard from our speaker, Nearshoring is a business model in which companies move their operation to the closer and more profitable location. So we had, as a region, many advantages, but at the same time, we had a great opportunity. And the most important, our role of Hanchang and the role of Think Huge and the role of everybody is working together to bring this opportunity for our countries. Definitely working together as a team, we can make this happen. This is not something new. This is something that is coming and that we need to take advantage. And it's only 8 or 10% of what is being done in Asia, being transferred. Let me tell you, even though we're competing right now between each country, there can be a lot of opportunity, not just for all Central America and Mexico, but also for the Caribbean and South America. So thank you again, and really appreciate this timing sharing with us.
Many thanks, Ms. Claudia, for your closing remarks. And once again, thanks to our speakers for your time and for sharing with us all your knowledge and experiences regarding such an important topic. I also want to thank to all the participants for joining us today, and of course to our sponsors, Club Platinum, Argos, Chevron, Consortium Legal, Crowley, Dagas, Deloitte, Dinant, Diunsa, Dole, Ficosa, GK, Ismania, Pangea, Securities, and Seguros Atlántida, who made it possible to hold today's event. And of course, again, thank you to our allies, the U.S. Embassy in Honduras, Think Huge, the World Bank, ACLA, and Crowley for joining with us and participating on this event. Remember that at the end of the day, we'll be sharing with you the YouTube link of today's event. I also invite you to follow our social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. You can find us as AmCham Honduras, in which we will keep you posted of our next conferences. Without further ado, we conclude with today's conference, and thank you again for joining us, and have an outstanding afternoon.
Thank you.